It's 4 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thank you for your attention this morning. We will, of course, be keeping a close eye on events in Normandy. Henry Riley's still there for LBC as the 80th anniversary of D-Day is commemorated. And I think we will. You seem to be keen as I am to listen to that speech by George VI in full, because I think it gives us a kind of, what's the word? It gives us a different perspective in space and time. And speaking of space and time, I know I've shared this with you before, and it's a slightly banal observation in some ways, but I never cease to be stunned by how close to the end of the Second World War I was born. Because as a man in his very early 50s, I grew up seeing it as a long-distant event, as something that was very much in the history books, as opposed to something that was very, very much in the memories of lots of people, millions of people around me. So I was born in 1972. And the war ended in 1945, as you know. So that is just 27 years. I wasn't even married, but at the age of 27. I mean, 20. What was 27 years ago? You're looking at roughly when Tony Blair became Prime Minister. So when I was born, the end of the Second World War was as recent as the election of Tony Blair is now. And yet, for reasons I don't even begin to properly understand, I grew up, most people my age grew up with it feeling much, much further back in the rearview mirror. And I wonder whether part of the reason for that is the famous reluctance of the men and indeed women who were engaged, who fought in the Second World War, to talk about it. And that's never more acute, that's never more apparent, is it, than on the anniversary of D-Day. That is the time that we hear so often, both, not so much anymore from the people that were there, but from their children and their grandchildren, that dad or granddad never, ever talked about it. I heard something extraordinary on the radio today. Quite odd, actually, because it wasn't a phone-in and it wasn't a report. It was just a presenter reading out an email from a listener. And it involved a man talking about visiting the museum, visiting a military museum with his own father. And they'd been tempted into the museum by an exhibit about gardens. There'd been something on the telly about sort of wartime gardening or something like that. I forget the exact details because I wasn't paying full attention until what happened next happened. And what happened next? This fellow wrote that his dad noticed that there was an exhibition specific to D-Day in the museum. Probably be the Imperial War Museum, would it? I'm not sure. And he said, should we have a look at that before we go? And so the family trooped off down the different corridor and walked into the room where the D-Day exhibition, the D-Day exhibit was. It was permanent, I think. And they happened upon a huge map. And his dad stood in front of this map for quite a long time. And after a couple of minutes, he stuck his finger on it, not far from Pegasus Bridge. He stuck his finger on this map and then, there it is. That's where I landed. And until that moment, this correspondent had absolutely no idea that his father had even been at D-Day. I think he had a vague knowledge that he'd been in the army and involved in the Second World War, but he'd had no idea at all that his father had been involved in D-Day. And then I sort of think, what do you mean you landed, Dad? You landed there? Because that's where my glider came down. That's where I came down in my glider And he certainly had no idea that his own father had piloted a glider on D-Day. And then the father, the older gentleman in this story, sort of said, "Right, okay, shall we go on now? Shall we go for lunch or something like that?" And the correspondent, the writer of this email, wrote that he never, ever mentioned it again. They never talked about it again. And I don't know that I've ever heard a more powerful illustration of that reluctance and reticence displayed by almost all of that generation. I just found it so compelling, because we could do that thing in a cliched way. Say, stiff upper lip, they never talk about there. But sometimes a story is worth one single story is worth 1,000 pages of reportage, isn't it? One family story like that. We just don't talk about it. And I want to know why this morning. I want to know why. We won't, sadly, be able to speak to many or indeed any people from that generation. I don't know. Well, you may. I hope you do. But I think for the general good, subsequent generations have been encouraged to talk much more about traumatic experiences, to talk much more about their feelings. Still, I would argue, not as much as we could and not as much as we should, but the liberating nature of disclosure, not necessarily cognitive behavioral therapy, but simple explanation. The old adage, a problem shared is a problem halved, it's a cliche for a reason. But I don't know why. I mean, I know the what of it. I know that people didn't want to seem boastful, perhaps, or they didn't want to dwell upon the trauma. But the proper why of it. Do we know why? Why didn't your dad talk about it? 0345 6060973. Why would there be such a reluctance and such a reticence to discuss such matters? Because when they talk about it now, and Henry has been filing some brilliant journalism from Normandy, and of course lots of other news organisations have done the same, and the veterans are quite forthcoming now. I don't know whether they were. I mean, at the 50th anniversary, were the veterans as forthcoming about their experiences? Do you need to be nearing the end of your life, perhaps, to uncork some of these recollections? I don't know. But it is incredibly important that they are forthcoming, because it's important that we know what happened. And two things strike me, actually. The first I've already mentioned is the I can't believe the proximity to the war of my own birth, given my experiences growing up and my perspective, the distance that I felt when I was growing up. And I know it's the same for almost everybody else, because you told me last time we mentioned this. And the second thing is the age. The age. I heard one veteran being interviewed, and he was asked what he felt. It was an odd question, actually, but it elicited a beautiful answer. So obviously the question worked. He was asked whether or not he felt the younger generation would be able to step up in the way that his generation had done, and he gave a very matter-of-fact answer. It was a kind of version of course he could. Of course they would. You're confronted with evil. We're not so different, whether you're 20 today or whether you were 20 in 1944. Some of the stuff beneath the bonnet's going to be absolutely identical. There'll be some changes, but I was struck by the age. I was struck by the fact that so many of the young men there would have been, really, really... I've got an 18-year-old at home, and that really stops you in your tracks, to think of that age group being in that place on this day, doesn't it? I missed a bit out of that story earlier about the gentleman visiting the Imperial War Museum with his dad, but Eleanor noticed it. She's just texted me. Because the question that the son asked, you're not going to believe the question that the son asked his dad. So his dad sticks a finger on the map and goes, "That's it, that's where I landed." And the son's got absolutely no idea that his dad had been involved in D-Day, let alone that he'd flown a glider over the beaches and landed it just shy of Pegasus Bridge. And so he said, he asked him a question. Can you guess what question this bloke asked his dad after discovering that he'd not only taken part in D-Day, but suddenly in that moment pinpointed the precise spot where he'd actually landed his glider? I'll give you a clue, shall I? Regular listeners to this programme, I think, would not have failed to note the quality of the question that this chap asked his dad, because the question that he asked his dad was, what was it like? What was it like? How many times have we sat here together and said that is actually the best question you can ever ask in some circumstances? There's a long story as to why people who listen to this programme a lot will have chuckled or had a wry smile when that question was asked by somebody else this morning. What was it like? And the answer was, it wasn't very nice. It's 10:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC on the 6th of June, 2024. It is 17 minutes after 10, and at that time, on this day, 80 years ago, the 916th German Grenadier Regiment had just reported that between 60 and 70 landing craft were disembarking soldiers at Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. The German troops of Point du Hoc, at this point, were no longer answering radio calls. And we're asking this morning, why did the men engaged that day find it so difficult, or choose to be so reticent, so reluctant to talk about it subsequently? Martin's in Tunbridge Wells. Martin, what would you like to say? What can you tell us?
Hello, James. Bear with me, because I'm finding this very, very difficult.
Take your time.
To try and answer your question, my father just turned 20 when he was piloting the craft delivering the soldiers to the Normandy beaches.
Wow.
And I think the answer to your question is my father was very typical of that generation. Gentlemen didn't want to show their feelings.
Yeah.
They didn't want to talk about subjects that would raise their feelings, and they didn't want to show their feelings. And it was quite profound.
How do you mean?
As I was watching some of the broadcasts,
yes,
showing the event in Normandy, the gentlemen were starting to release their feelings.
Yes.
And it reminded me so much of my father, who kept his feelings and his thoughts to himself so much.
Yes.
And because he's no longer with us, I can't have that conversation with him.
You feel that he kept it so tightly screwed down?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Do you think to his own detriment in a way? I hope you don't mind me asking that question, Martin.
No, I think that's right. And you know what, sort of in a silly way ran through my mind, if that generation had social media, what a different world they would have been in.
Bloody hell, there's a thought, eh? There's
a
thought. I mean, this. Yes, you're right. The tendency these days for excessive disclosure or oversharing stands in stark contrast to what you described.
Yes.
I mean, do we mean never? I mean, did you know nothing from his mouth of what he had done that day?
Nothing. I think I'm right in saying nothing. He went on to have a flourishing life, very interesting life in the film industry.
Gosh.
Took him all around the world, and you know what? He wouldn't even speak about all of those adventures, making films like Lawrence of Arabia,
what a life!
Zhivago, all around the world with famous film stars, and just wouldn't open up. You know, it's endemic in that generation.
Well, is it though, or is it the experiences so early that just that create that tendency? So once you've mastered the art, if you like, of battening down those mental hatches, they stay battened down. You just don't talk about anything, really. You don't talk about yourself at all.
I think that's very true, James. You hit it on the nail on the head there.
When did you first... I won't keep you for much longer because I can tell that you're emotional, and everyone listening can understand why. But when do you remember when did you find out? When do you remember finding out that your dad had been there on D-Day?
I can't pick the date, but it was an event where we were going through some old photograph albums, and there was one there of when he was marrying my mother.
Yes.
In 1948, and there were one or two photos there, portrait photos of him in his Navy uniform.
Right.
And I must have asked him, what was this all about? What happened?
Yeah.
But he just wouldn't volunteer anything.
Good grief.
Yeah.
And pride, I presume, in what he did, even though you...
Oh, I'm sure that's the case, yeah. I mean, he was a northern lad, and, made of true fibre.
Strong stuff. Martin, thank you. I thank you for sharing that as well. It was incredibly powerful. And because we honour his memory. 22 minutes after 10 is the time. This is interesting as well from Damir, who writes, I'm Bosnian. Our war ended 29 years ago in 1995. I was in the army between 92 and 95 and still carry shrapnel in my left shoulder. When I meet with my wartime mates, we never talk about the 90s. Some of us were fighting because we wanted to, some because they had to. But we all felt deflated and defeated when the war ended, and we didn't receive the recognition that we thought we would. Those who didn't fight were at first interested in our experiences, but that didn't last long. People moved on, and our stories became irrelevant for life in peacetime. So we stopped talking about it to others, and then we stopped talking about it to each other. And we also moved on and only really remember those times on very, very rare occasions. I guess it's the nature of life, of memories, and of the way we remember. And Damir concludes, I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Martin's in Malvern. Martin, what would you like to say?
Hello. I think with my father, it was the reason he didn't want to talk about it. It was just such severe trauma that was buried so deep. And I only found out about. I'm emotional as well.
Of course.
Only found out about it in 1994. He had terrible scarring across his shoulder.
Right.
And
scarring. Sorry.
Scarring across his shoulder. And he said to my brother and I, always used to say, "Oh, it's nothing. It was a bit of shrapnel. That was it." And then in 1994, the 50th anniversary celebrations, he was sitting watching the television with my mother, and he burst into tears and then talked for an hour, told her exactly what had happened. And then that was it. Never said another word until he died in 1999. And what happened, he was on the second wave and he was ordered to take that hill over there. And from the side, machine gunner, his mate next to him was killed instantly. He had awful machine gun wounds on his shoulder. He was taken to a field hospital. They wanted to amputate his arm. And he told them, no, if you take my arm off, I won't be able to work when I get back home. And they stitched him up. He was convalescing for over a year. And then, as a result, he went back to work at a factory in Worcester. Wow. And then there he met my mum. And as a result of that, my brother and I are here. And I didn't know anything about it until 1994.
And you were...
Trauma. He was... you could see, he would go at times, if there was a war film on that my brother and I was watching, he would walk out the room and, we never understood why, and he would also have days when you could see, he would just be very, very quiet and he would go off walking and he just, it was just trauma.
That's incredible.
That's
very,
incredible. Very, very deep.
Was it just him and your mum that were watching the telly that day? And so she told... Were you there as well? Or did she tell you about it later?
She told me all about it later. And I asked him, And I said, Mum's told me this. So I asked him, and he said, "Oh no, I don't want to talk about it." And that was it. Yeah.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? It feels like a pressure cooker, and just for that hour, for that 1 hour in 1994, the lid came off.
Yeah, Mum said he cried and cried and cried, and then told the story. I'm crying.
Of course you are. Of course you are. And he had a good life. He had a good marriage, and you and your brother.
Me and my brother.
If he
hadn't been able to go to work, he wouldn't at the gloving factory in Worcester.
Yes, of course. God, flipping heck, the road not taken, the little sliding door moments.
Yeah.
Martin, thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely amazing, isn't it? Just two stories, really, that just completely embody what we're talking about. Make it perhaps a little unnecessary to wonder whether it was good or bad for the men concerned. It worked. I think that's the point that Damir, who fought in the war in Yugoslavia, in the former Yugoslavia, I think that's the point that he was making. It worked. Maybe there is no choice. Talking about things is good, but some things are so huge and so many people would... I don't know. 27 minutes after 10 is the time. Jules is in Edinburgh. Jules, what would you like to say?
It's just, James, the stories we've been hearing are so familiar to me. My father was Polish, fought in the Second World War, was a prisoner of war twice.
Crikey.
And there were terrible atrocities that had happened directly to his family in Poland and in the village near to where he lived.
Right.
And he never spoke of them. So I came through school in the 1950s and 60s learning about the Second World War, mentioned it to my dad, but it was always kind of historical.
Yes,
It was factual.
Yes.
And then I got married in 1974, and about a couple of years later, luckily my husband and my father got on very well together, and my father started to tell my husband all that had happened. But my mother and I never knew. Oh. And the only thing I can think is that because it was so bad, because it was so traumatic, things that happened were just beyond our understanding of what it means to be human. And I think he wanted to protect my mother and me from it. Sadly, I never asked him why he didn't tell us, but that's the only thing I can think of. He wanted to protect us.
Yes, well, I think that's if you'd allow me to say so, Jules, I think that's quite a beautiful reason for not wanting to tell you about it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did your husband then presumably filled you in on some of the details of what your dad had done?
All of it.
Yes.
All of it. And I was able to, again, it was almost through a third party. When I tried to speak to my father about it, again, he was reticent. But then when my daughter was doing, the project on the Second World War, they were asked if they could speak. She's in her 40s now, so they were asked if they could speak to somebody who'd been in the war. And he told parts of the story again to her. Now, my father sadly no longer with us, but I have written it all out in a letter to each of the grandchildren that will be given to them, so it can be passed on.
Like a torch.
One of the things my father always said was, it's not enough that we stand up at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month and remember them. We must remember them every day, and we must remember why this happened.
And we really don't, do we? I couldn't agree more with that idea, but in a way, I suppose the conversation we're having today partly explains why we don't. We talk about it more, I bet, on the 80th anniversary than we would have done on the 40th. I mean, generally, outside of today, because men like your father and like all the fathers whose children we've heard from so far today didn't want us to. So it's trickier than it sounds, actually, trickier than you'd expect. Jules, wow, thank you so much. It's just gone 10:30 on this day at this time 80 years ago. American paratroopers from the Dog Company, as it was known, the 505th PIR, were involved in heavy fighting near the town of Neuville-au-Plain. On Omaha Beach, crucially, two 75mm guns on Pointe de la Percée were put out of action by the destroyer USS McCook, and they'd been causing epic destruction. And that reminds me, in fact, of something I read last night about Winston Churchill on the night before, on the night of the 5th, saying goodnight to his wife Clementine and reportedly saying to her, do you know that 20,000 men could be dead by this time tomorrow? Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 10:34 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue to mark the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and we'll do so on LBC throughout the day. But the question I began with, and I think you'll probably agree, it was definitely the right question to ask today, given the power of the contributors that we've heard, some of the contributions that we've heard so far, was about that, almost that old sort of cliche about the men who landed that day never talking about it. I mean, never really talking about military service in general, and just wondering what that did to them. Not the service, not the trauma, not the experience, but the silence. The image of a man 50 years later allowing himself, Martin's dad in 1994, sitting in Malvern or in Worcester in front of the telly, and allowing 50 years worth of suppressed emotion to come pouring out for a 60-minute window and then to be tamped back down again forever, according to his own son. That's an incredible thought, isn't it? An incredible image and an incredible memory. It is 10:36. The wreath-laying ceremony is currently underway. Henry Riley is watching it. We'll catch up with him shortly. But before that, Marie Jose is in Claygate in Surrey. I probably mispronounced your name then.
You did.
Yeah. How should I have said it?
It's Marie Jose, because my parents were Dutch. I'm very British.
Right.
Yes, I'm very British.
Well,
they were
go.
Dutch.
I've tidied that. I've cleared that one up. What made you pick up the phone, Marie Jose?
Well, it's triggered lots of things in me, because I think a lot about my parents as I get older.
Yes.
And they were, my father was in the Navy in the war, the Dutch Navy, and he was the youngest captain in the fleet at the age of 23.
Gosh.
And my mother was a nurse. Mm. And they never, she nursed Germans as well as other, injured troops.
Yes.
And there wasn't a choice about that.
Of course.
And the only thing that she ever said was that she had a best friend who was German, who was a nurse.
Wow.
And they had to keep it quiet because that was not allowed. Clearly, that would have been, you would have been punished for that and probably killed as a traitor. Her brother left for Australia because he fell in love with a German after the war and he was going to be lynched. So, there's a whole history there. And my parents never spoke about anything. And I look back now and think they were very traumatized.
Yes.
Very traumatized. My mother had a larder. When she died, we went into the kitchen and there was a larder full of stuff that hadn't been used. Sugar, flour.
Just in case.
Yes, I think so. We never understood that.
Do you think they talk to each other about their experiences?
No, absolutely not. It was just not talked about.
Just for people unfamiliar with the history, this would be occupied Netherlands.
Yes,
which is why the tensions between fraternisation with and indeed treating quotes the enemy end quotes would be so near the surface, be so acute. I'm so glad you were listening today, because history's only ever really told by the victors, isn't it? Not even actually by the liberated, which is why the French responses to the D-Day troops, the French school children, I think are so powerful and stop a lot of people on this side of the channel in their tracks.
Absolutely. And my mother had a very kind of Monty Python conversation with the next door neighbour who'd been her next door neighbour for years. Nora would say,
yes.
We only had 2 teaspoons of sugar and half a cup of milk. And my mother would look at her and say, we ate tulip bulbs in the field.
God. You had milk?
Yes, exactly. And I remember being horrified that they were arguing, but that's
over who had it harder.
Arguing.
Who had it harder?
Yes.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, and I think our generation, the children of these people who went through hell,
yes.
Because it's not shared with us, it becomes incredibly emotional and unfair, because we would have been so proud to know all of that.
That's so beautifully put, and in fact, that I think puts the gentlemen that were on before you into a slightly new perspective, doesn't it? In that, why would you be so emotional today because you can't ever say to your dad or your mum, "That's incredible, I'm so proud." And that feels cruel in a way, not to have been able to have had that little bit of the conversation. But in order to have that little bit of it, of course, you'd had to have had the big bit. You'd had to have had the conversation about what had actually happened. Mariose, thank you so much. It is coming up to 20 to 10. Henry Riley is at Vers-sur-Mer in northern France, where the wreath-laying ceremony has been underway. Henry, just tell us what you've seen and what you've heard this morning, please.
Well, James, good morning. In the last 30 seconds or so, actually, the red arrows just went past 6 of them, and it was quite spectacular. And the faces of those veterans as they saw the red arrows go up above them was quite something, I have to say. This is the big British commemorative event of the D-Day commemoration. Emmanuel Macron is here representing France, but of course King Charles is in attendance. Macron actually sat next to King Charles with his wife Brigitte. Rishi Sunak is here, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer likewise, and Prince Albert of Monaco arrived earlier on as well to pay his respects. Now, this has been, this particular service, James, dominated, as is right, as you would expect, by veterans. And at one point, Martin Freeman read the words of a man called Joe Mines in front of the few thousand people that are here. He gave a reading saying, "War is brutal." And I had the privilege of speaking with Joe yesterday. He is a former minesweeper. He'd actually been talking to the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, and they were chatting for around 20 minutes or so. There was afternoon tea before a ceremony that happened yesterday. Now, he's 99 years old, landed at Gold Beach on D-Day, which is right here at Vers-sur-Mer, and he told me yesterday about his conversation with royalty.
Nice to talk to, yeah. Very calm with everything, yeah. Went very well, yeah. This is my first time back in 80 years.
Really? How are you finding it?
I didn't want to come back in the past because it was so bad. You can't explain to people how rough it was. You know, so many men getting killed. So I come back here in respect for those that I left here. And I want to pay my respect to those that I left here.
Now, the British National Anthem has just concluded. The various dignitaries are leaving. In front of me, I can see the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. I can also see Lord Ricketts, who's the Honorary President of the Normandy Memorial Trust. Sir Tom Jones sung at one point, "I won't crumble with you if you fall." Just before that, Emmanuel Macron arrived. Not that I'm suggesting there's any correlation that Monsieur Macron's a fan of Tom Jones. There was also Lord Lloyd Webber had commissioned Lovingly Remembered, which is an anthem specially and specifically commissioned for today. The words by Don Black, which was a really beautiful song that took place at one point as well. Now, this whole trip, James, has rightly been regarding the veterans who fought here 80 years ago on this day. And Donald Turrell was a man who I was talking to ahead of this particular day, the 6th of June. He was a rifleman in the Cameronian Highlanders. He landed a few miles from here on Sword Beach. He is one of the last Cameronians still alive from World War II, and he told me what he'd be thinking of today.
All the lads got shot and killed, and we're all missed. It was a very tight group, and you miss them. Remembering that we're all green as grass, and they was all pre-war soldiers, you know.
Was it Thomas Freeburn, was it?
Freeburn and William Carr. They was two friends from the same village, and they was both dead together.
And that other voice you can hear there, James, is Callum Reid, an extraordinary man. So he is a chartered accountant, 27 years old, and he met Don in a bar in Normandy a few years back in 2019 on the 75th anniversary. They got talking, and I'm told drinking until way into the early hours of the morning, and have become the best of friends. Callum, who I referenced, a chartered accountant, has taken the week off in annual leave to be Don's carer for the week. They were very nervous, the pair of them, last month, though, James, because Don very sadly had to be taken into hospital. He was fearful that he wouldn't make it, and he told me about that.
I was at one stage, yeah. You know, that dark hole that people talk about, you know, going down that hole and then disappearing or whatever. Well, I got to that stage where there's this big white hole, and beyond that was another little hole, and it was black and white. And it was so comfortable down there. I was sitting down there. It was so comfortable, I wanted to go further, and that would have been me sliding off the plate. So, anyway, someone must have said something, and I was next to me. I was coming to life again, you know.
Yeah.
Thank God he didn't go down that tunnel.
Well, I think about 2 or 3 hours or something less than that, I wouldn't be here now.
Really?
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, hell of it. He told me that on the phone. It was a hell of a thing to hear. But he's here now, and he's got more life than ever. It's a testament of who he is.
And they pride themselves on being a bit of a double act, James. They are hilarious together, constantly taking the mickey out of each other. They really have become the best of friends. And he is just one of around 40 veterans who've made the journey to northern France and are paying their respects today.
That was magical. I don't think I've ever heard the figure of speech sliding off the plate before, but I'm not gonna forget it in a hurry.
I know. To hear that as well from Don himself was, I mean, he is an absolute character. He's constantly taking the mickey out of the taxi drivers, because I'm here with the taxi charity for military veterans. He's constantly telling them off. He's constantly laughing, pulling pranks. He's here, obviously paying his respects, but he's also, rightly so, having a brilliant time.
Yes. Henry, thank you. And we may talk again. If not, I know that you'll be on with Sheila Fogarty. The time now is 10:46. It is 10:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've never heard this before, and I'm going to be listening to it for the first time with you. But I heard reference to it earlier and just thought that's probably something that we should have a pay proper attention to. It's a speech given by King George VI in the early hours of June the 6th, 1944, as tens of thousands of Allied forces steeled themselves for the Battle of Normandy, and Operation Overlord was launched. It was an effort to inspire, comfort, and rally the whole nation, of course, not only to survive, but also to win that final victory for the good cause, as you'll hear, as the troops were heading off to war. So everybody would have listened to this on their wirelesses. I imagine that the entire country would have tuned in, and the first voice you will hear is the BBC announcer on that day.
This is London calling in the overseas service of the BBC, calling New Zealand, Australia, the Far East, India, Persia and Iraq, East Africa, the Near East, Italy, North Africa, Malta, Gibraltar, and the whole of the Mediterranean area, Central Africa, South Africa, West Africa, Canada, the United States of America, the British West Indies, Central America, and South America. In a few moments, we shall hear His Majesty the King. This is London. In a few moments, His Majesty the King will speak to his people at home and overseas. He will also be heard throughout the United States of America.
4 years ago, our nation and empire stood alone against an overwhelming enemy with our backs to the wall. Tested as never before in our history, in God's providence, we survived that test. The spirit of the people, resolute, dedicated, burnt like a bright flame, lit surely from those unseen fires which nothing can quench. Once more, a supreme test has to be faced. This time, the challenge is not to fight to survive, but to fight to win the final victory for the good cause. Once again, what is demanded from us all is something more than courage, more than endurance. We needed a revival of spirit, a new, unconquerable resolve. After nearly 5 years of toil and suffering, we must renew that crusading impulse on which we entered the war and met its darkest hour. We and our allies are sure that our fight is against evil and for a world in which goodness and honor may be the foundation of the life of men in every land. That we may be worthily matched with this new summons of destiny, I desire solemnly to call my people to prayer and dedication. We are not unmindful of our own shortcomings, past and present. We shall ask not that God may do our will, but that we may be enabled to do the will of God. And we dare to believe that God has used our nation and empire as an instrument for fulfilling his high purpose. I hope that throughout the present crisis of the liberation of Europe, there may be offered up earnest, continuous, and widespread prayer. We who remain in this land can most effectively enter into the sufferings of subjugated Europe by prayer, whereby we can fortify the determination of our sailors, soldiers, and airmen who go forth to set the captives free. The Queen joins with me in sending you this message. She well understands the anxieties and cares of our women folk at this time. And she knows that many of them will find, as she does herself, fresh strength and comfort in such waiting upon God. She feels that many women will be glad in this way to keep vigil with their men as they man the ships, storm the beaches, and fill the skies. At this historic moment, surely not one of us is too busy, too young, or too old to play a part in a nationwide, a worldwide vigil of prayer as the great crusade sets forth. If from every place of worship, from home and factory, from men and women of all ages, and many races and occupations, our intercessions rise, then, please God, both now and in the future, not remote, the predictions of an ancient psalm may be fulfilled. And the Lord will give strength unto his people. And the Lord will give his people the blessing of peace.
George VI there speaking to, well, you heard who he was speaking to at the beginning of that clip on in the early hours of June the 6th, 1944. The 80th anniversary commemorations continue both in this country and, of course, crucially, in Normandy, where the D-Day landings occurred. In fact, at approximately this time on that day, the German radar station at Point de la Percée was attacked by the destroyer USS Thompson off Omaha Beach, which was firing 127mm shells. This really struck me because the necessity of taking that radar station out was absolutely acute. And this is a message that was sent by the 3rd Company of the 726th German Grenadier Regiment to the headquarters of the 352nd Infantry Division at about this time, 80 years ago today. And I quote, "The enemy with 2 companies invested the battery of the Point du Hoc. Special shells with ladders were fired on top of the cliff. Thus this natural obstacle can be climbed." So I'd never heard that before. Have you? So you fire a shell to the top of the cliff and it somehow embeds a ladder so that people can then climb up it, in this case to attack the radar station. And at around the same time, at around about 11 o'clock that morning, Gold Beach, 7 beach exits had been cleared, because of course landing the troops on the beaches was only part one of the mission. Ensuring that they could make their way from the beaches was part 2, and that by 11 o'clock 7 beach exits from Gold Beach alone had been cleared. Thank you to everybody who contributed to that hour of the programme, and indeed to Dom, who made me laugh halfway through that clip when he sent a message saying that phone line is a bit rough. Yeah, we have had some dodgy lines over the years, but I think everybody understands why the poor audio quality in that one was well worth enduring. A couple of people mentioning the slowness of the King's speech. I presume that was his management of his stutter, which was famously examined, of course, in that film with Colin Firth and Geoffrey Rush. But we will move on in the next hour. We will move back into the current era, the modern day, and we'll look at Frank Hester's money in Tory party coffers. It is 3 minutes after 11, and some news that broke earlier today. An Israeli airstrike on a UN school packed with hundreds of displaced people in central Gaza has left at least 27 dead, according to local officials. Local journalists told the BBC earlier that an Israeli warplane had fired 2 missiles at classrooms on the top floor of the school in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Israel has claimed that it was that there was a Hamas compound embedded inside the school. We reflected yesterday on what would have happened if the British government had started blowing up schools in Northern Ireland, because they claimed that the IRA was using them as cover or was using them as compounds. I'll just leave that question hanging. But I can tell you that the Belgian foreign minister has commented on this. The Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Affairs, Foreign Trade, Hadja Labib, has said a ceasefire now. The devastating airstrike on an UNRWA school in Gaza is an appalling and unacceptable act of violence. All parties must respect civilian infrastructure. This tragedy reminds us of the urgency to end the violence. It perhaps assumes a slightly different poignancy and power, that response from that politician, given the conversations that we were having in the first hour. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. Here we go. The racist businessman Frank Hester gave £10 million to the Tories. We knew about that. And then the full details of his disgusting comments regarding Diane Abbott emerged. They are almost unbelievably bad. Even now, it was in March, was it? I think. It's only April, May, so 3 or 4 months later. I still can't quite believe how unpleasant they were. It probably makes me sound very, very naive to you, very thin-skinned. But I see a lot of racism, obviously. You know, on social media and in my inbox, I'm something of I'm catnip for racists in some ways. I have been for a very long time now. So I've seen some really, really disgusting stuff, but I still found it extraordinary that somebody could do this so publicly and so prominently, saying in a meeting of his own workforce that he didn't hate all black women, but that whenever he sees Diane Abbott, who's of course Britain's longest serving black MP, on TV, he finds himself, well, he said himself, whenever he sees it, you just want to hate all black women because she's there. I mean, truly gross comments, which Rishi Sunak rightly described as racist. But he kept the 10 million quid that Frank Hester had donated to the Conservative Party. And today it emerges that the Tories have indeed, as was believed, but as has now been confirmed, accepted another £5 million from his company. He is now, therefore, by far, by a country mile, the Tories' single biggest donor. Diane Abbott, who is standing for the Labour Party, will be standing against somebody funded at least in part or in some way by this money, by this racist's money. He will be bankrolling quite a lot of campaigning going on in the current general election, and it is money that Rishi Sunak has elected not to give back. I find it extraordinary. Racist and misogynistic. Another £5 million in January, which they have hung on to. These are figures released today by the Electoral Commission. Makes you want to hate all black women. And I mean, it goes further in case you think, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. He thinks she should be shot. He called for Diane Abbott to be shot. So when she appears on television, it makes him want to hate all black women. And listen, I don't think anybody truly believes that he would take out a contract on her or genuinely celebrate if she was assassinated, like Joe Cox or David Amos or But he said it in front of people. And those words were, in quotes, should be shot. She, quotes, should be shot, end quotes. Now, I've been a bit haunted by a call that we took on Monday from Joy, who was talking about the comments that led to Diane Abbott being excluded from the Labour Party for a while. She, of course, has the whip back now, and as far as we know, is going to be running in Hackney. I was quite short with Joy because she said she agreed with what Diane Abbott had said. And I know that she didn't agree with what Diane Abbott had said. She agreed with what Diane Abbott meant. And the distinction for me was crucial. I possibly got a little bit a bit bogged down in that point. But it seemed to me to be really important to stress that what she wrote in the letter to the Observer about Irish travellers and Jewish people not experiencing racism, but experiencing something else, which she chose to call prejudice, was a terrible mistake. But I do know what she meant. And what she meant was a point made quite perfectly by David Baddiel's niece in a documentary that accompanied his book, Jews Don't Count, when David Baddiel's own niece, who is mixed race, explained that she has different experiences according to her colour than she does according to her Judaism. So, for example, you're never going to be pulled over in your car because you look Jewish. But she told stories of people she knew who would have that experience with the police because they were black. So she was trying to describe a sort of, I don't know if I don't like the phrase hierarchy of racism, but she was trying to describe the idea that even in a universe where we recognize prejudice, bigotry, and racism, experiences will be different according to your immutable characteristics. So she was simply trying, I think, to explain that the experience of being black would be very different from the experience of being an Irish traveller or a Jew. But, of course, to claim that the latter didn't experience racism was a terrible, terrible mistake. But this seems to me to be proof of the point she was trying to make. I cannot conceive of a prominent public figure, whether they wanted to be prominent or not, saying what he said about black women, about other groupings. Now, I could be wrong, and I'm never 100% sure about the universal wisdom of doing counterfactuals like this. But could you imagine if Frank Hester had said, for example, that Margaret Hodge makes him hate all Jewish women and that he would like her to be shot? Now, I could be wrong about this, right? I could be wrong. Or I don't think we've got Irish traveller representation in the House of Commons, have we? But if Frank Hester were to say something about the immutable characteristics of somebody from a minority who wasn't a black woman, I cannot conceive of Rishi Sunak hanging on to the cash and then taking another 5 million quid. Well, he already had the 5 million quid in the sort of in the pipeline. Can you? I genuinely find it extraordinary that this man's money remains in the Conservative Party bank account. Diane Abbott makes him want to hate all black women, and she, in his own words, and I quote, should be shot. Now, Diane has responded to this morning. She's not giving interviews. I imagine everybody's asking her for one. Diane Abbott has responded to this morning, and she makes points that I completely concur with. And she does so, of course, from a position of a lifetime of racist abuse. There was a little bit of a reprieve for her when I was on holiday last week, I noticed, when lots of people who've often led the line on abusing Diane Abbott and certainly turning a blind eye, if not actively joining in on the racism that she's endured for pretty much her entire career, suddenly discovered a deep concern about her career prospects because they thought it might be a way in which to attack or damage Keir Starmer. But she wrote this morning, Rishi Sunak belatedly admitted Frank Hester's remarks that I made him hate all black women and should be shot were racist. Now it turns out he's accepted a further £5 million from him, an insult to me and to all black women. 30 minutes after 11 is the time. I think that this is a morning where your ethnicity is of crucial importance to your contribution. How does this... Because the reason why Joy's call haunted me is that I wondered whether if I wasn't white, I would have been so strident in insisting that she clarify what she meant about Diane Abbott's comments about being black. And I just wondered whether there was a sort of form of white privilege in play there. Because I cannot imagine being on the receiving end of this sort of comment. You know, a fully paid up, a fully integrate, whatever word you want to use, a fellow Brit, right? A fellow Brit, a fellow 52-year-old Brit whose daughters happen to be black as opposed to white, like my daughters are, in a country governed by a man who will happily not just take 10 million quid or hang on to 10 million quid, donated by somebody who said what Frank Hester said, but also know while describing these racist words as racist, as Sunak belatedly did, while describing these racist words as racist, knowing that there's another 5 million quid in the bank. Could you imagine the conversations? Do you think anybody anywhere said to Rishi Sunak, well, we can't give the money back. We simply can't afford to give the money back. I mean, just breathtaking, right? What if it had been the P word? What if he'd been talking about an Asian woman in such disgusting terms? What if it had been Priti Patel and he'd said, God, he just makes me hate all brown women. He makes me hate but Priti Patel, when she comes on the telly, she makes me hate all brown women. I think she should be shot. I guess what I'm asking you, and what Joy's call on Monday nudged me towards, is whether or not this is actually evidence of what Diane Abbott was trying to articulate, that there is, if you like, an experience in British public life that only black people will understand, or that only in this case, and because Diane makes the point, it's an insult to me and all black women. That phrase misogynoir that I was introduced to by you when we were trying to work out why some people completely lose their marbles over Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's decision he didn't decide to fall in love with her, but the decision to marry her certainly caused many people who had previously seemed quite sane to go absolutely bananas. So what I want you to tell me, honestly, is how this makes you feel. How this makes you feel, because it's been a few weeks now since this happened, and it now has been confirmed beyond doubt that you can say about a black woman that she should be shot, and you can say that one black woman makes you want to hate all of them, and you can be caught saying that, and you can remain a VIP in the eyes of the current Prime Minister, in the eyes of the governing party, in the eyes, presumably, of every single Conservative MP preparing to go out on the campaign trail with a little bit of fuel in their tanks, paid for by the racist, misogynist Frank Hester. I find it absolutely extraordinary. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call for you to tell me how it feels to be part of the target that Frank Hester has unleashed this bilious commentary on. I mean, as a black woman, do you feel personally insulted? Is Diane Abbott right when she describes this as an insult to all black women? And if you are a 52-year-old dad with black daughters, do you want to have a go at telling me how different our relationship with this country is? Using this as proof, using this as evidence, using this as the jumping off point. And if you want, just to make sure there are many entry points for this conversation, if you want, you can tell me why they've kept the money. Why they've kept the money. What message? What if you're I suppose off the top of my head, I'm going to think of Kemi Badenoch as a black woman running for Parliament as a member of the Conservative Party. I can't remember whether she got asked about this or not. But, I mean, what if you're just a party worker? What if you're thinking about going out on the doorstep as a black woman? You're going to go out because you think that Rishi Sunak will be the greatest Prime Minister, or that we can't run the risk of having Keir Starmer in Downing Street, and you're going to go out and support your local candidate. And you know that they've taken £15 million from a man who, well, he hates you, or he wants to hate you every time he sees Diane Abbott on the telly. You might hate Diane Abbott, but this man wants to hate you. That's pretty much the distillation of racism, isn't it? I hate all of them. It's got absolutely nothing to do with behaviour. I hate them all because they're black. And look, there's one over there, and she makes me hate them all, and I want her to be shot. Here's £15 million. I'm Rishi Sunak. Thank you very much. 21 minutes after 11. I mean, it's more the fact that they haven't given the money back that I want you to what that tells you about the country either in which you live or the party by which it is governed. All right, it's 11:22. It's Thursday, by the way. Mystery Hour's on the way. Crikey, we should crack on. And also, I've got a quick update for you on that mad story. I told you it was mad, but I was away when it happened. The Daily Mail stuck it on its front page that 4 in 10 privately educated school pupils were poised to leave as a consequence of Labour's decision to put VAT on school fees. Before we go to the phones, she did comment on it. You're quite right, Matthew. Kemi Badenoch was the first Tory to call those words racist and thereby shamed her colleagues and her boss into following suit. But the question remains, of course. Did anyone call for them to give the money back? Did anyone in the Tory party call for them to give the money back? If they didn't, I truly find that astonishing. And part of the way I articulate my astonishment is by wondering out loud what would happen if he'd spoken that way, perhaps about an Asian woman or about a Jewish woman or about an Irish traveller, albeit that members of that community are at the moment less likely to be in the House of Commons. A lot of O'Briens in the Irish travelling community, but not from my branch recently, not from my branch of the family. Ebony's in Bellingham. Ebony, what would you like to say?
Hi, I would like to say, I agree with the point you made about Diane Abbott, what the whole scenario of that, her basically trying to get her message across. Yeah. Agreed, potentially it could have been articulated better, but I think it's interesting that we probably could understand what she could have been trying to have said. Yeah. But as a black woman myself, I don't feel like she said anything that a lot of us don't already experience or don't already know.
But again, we did, we did this on Monday with a conversation about what we think she meant, with which we would agree, and then the conversation about what she actually said, which was unacceptable, because of course Jewish people experience racism differently is the point. But talk to me about Frank Hester. Talk to me about this 15 million quid.
Yes. So where I was going with Frank was
it's Frank, is it?
Because he has the money, the power, and like you mentioned earlier, the Conservative Party may think that they need his money. Yeah. It means it almost further proves the point that he can say what he likes because he has the financial power to have that advantage over someone, say, maybe a black person. Yeah. Or I'm not saying that there aren't black people who have that money power, but he's obviously clearly in the forefront. He's obviously clearly providing for the Conservative Party. So therefore, she would be, the backlash she would get would be a lot greater than him because he has the financial power. That's granted and clear, but in some circumstances, the money would have been given back. And I don't want to keep reaching for the counterfactuals when it was a different immutable characteristic or if it was a different ethnicity. But I don't believe. I'll say it. I think only a black woman would be exposed to what Diane Abbott has been exposed to here and see the culprit get off scot-free, not even be demoted from donor status. That's the thing about it, isn't it? It's just breathtaking. But I think that's the point. I think that's what I'm trying to say here. Yeah. I think it's due to having power, whether that be financial, whether that be...
Yeah, but you're looking at it from the other end of the telescope. You're describing him to me, whereas I'm looking at her experience and genuinely wondering whether there's any other section of our society except a black woman, maybe even a black male MP, would have prompted a different response. But because it's even Diane Abbott, like specifically Diane Abbott, maybe there's a conversation going on in Downing Street and they're saying, well, it's only Diane Abbott. We don't need to. We can keep the money. It's only Diane Abbott. But I just find it. That's the bit I can't get past. Is how nobody ever thought or that this demanded proper action. It demanded a proper response.
Yeah, and that's sad, really, because look at what she's done. Because she served for decades, but it also goes to show us, the public and the voters, essentially. It goes to show what she's probably been subjected to over the years and why she's been standing to speak for black women like myself. I am a lot younger in terms of, I'm new to the whole politics, but I am a voter. Yes. But what I'm trying to say is it's nothing new as a black woman. We know this. And the point that I wanted to make is that is just a small example that the world, the Britain's seen, but that's what we experience a lot. Anyway.
And it needs to blow up like this for people like me to see what you see and see what she sees and experience on a daily basis. Ebony, thank you. It is 27 minutes after 11. Claire's in Ivor. Claire, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm absolutely seething over this because you made a really good point. If it's I want to shoot all Pakistani people, Indian people, disabled people, Jewish people, you know what? That money would have gone back. And the reason the money hasn't gone back is because we're always hearing about black people and their issues. It's been very much diluted because black is that's yesterday. They're always having racism and shouting about racism.
Playing the race card, chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, it's too common. It's almost like it's too common. So people aren't taking the sharp intake of breath, right? I would love it if somebody had the opportunity to say to Rishi Sunak's face, if they said Pakistani, if they said blah, all of these other groups.
Makes me want to hate all Asian men, and I think you should be shot.
Yes. What would you do about that?
Yeah.
And my final point is, if there are any black women in this country listening that are Tory voters, I urge you to think again. Right, because you are associating yourself.
You're giving me purda paranoia on this one. But seeing as we're not being specific about any constituencies, and the ballot is not open, I think we're okay.
Okay, so if any black women are thinking, yeah, I'm a Tory person because I believe in this, you have to say to yourself, am I happy to be associated with a party that does not denounce somebody who this situation?
It's bigger. Am I happy to be campaigning, to be part of a campaign presumably funded in part by this racist man's money? A few of you asking me about the police investigation. I think it's still underway. I can't remember. I know the force was working to establish if a crime had been committed. These wheels move very slowly. Obviously, in the eyes of most of the British media, that is nowhere near as important as Angela Rayner's entirely innocuous 15-year-old housing arrangements, or the curry that Keir Starmer ate in Durham many, many years ago. Those stories both dominating front page coverage and propelled, in fact, by Tory politicians, all of whom would appear to be happy with the idea of campaigning on using funds donated by a racist misogynist, a prominent racist misogynist. It's coming up to 11:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'll give you the latest on that mad claim that we talked about a little earlier this week about 4 in 10. How many people ran with that Daily Mail front page, I wonder, claiming that 4 in 10 children in private schools could be pulling out? Quite an extraordinary development in that, which I think will tickle you almost as much as it tickled me. But first, Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 33 minutes after 11. Another little helpful moment in my ongoing mission to make the entire nation understand exactly how right-wing media works. You'll be familiar with that crazy front page story in the Daily Mail while I was away last week. 4 in 10 to quit private school, claiming to draw on research that had been conducted by a consultancy called Baines Cutler that provides schools with information and solution. And they'd undertaken, and indeed since the pandemic, they had surveyed school finances annually and been commissioned by 80 independent schools to conduct parental surveys for use by their senior management and governors to model and understand the potential impact of VAT on parents and schools. However, and they have those figures based on surveys covering about 35,000 pupils, but they released a statement yesterday saying, however, at no point have we suggested that these results were representative of the sector as a whole, nor that they should be in any way used to calculate national drop-off rates. So they stuck this on the front page of the Daily Mail, and I was away, but I wouldn't be surprised if phone-in programmes had just taken it as gospel. Obviously not this one, the idea of taking something from the Daily Mail as gospel. I mean, I've done it on occasion, but I certainly don't make a habit of it. But if indeed that did happen, then I suspect you probably won't be hearing this bit from this statement from Baines Cutler. We view these observations as helpful and useful contributors to the debate. These are the figures. Sadly, however, various media organisations have chosen to misuse our data over the last week, choosing to represent our work as indicating national drop-off rates or being in any way equivalent to our 2018 research. Doing so has led to some alarmist headlines, most notably that 42% of pupils will leave. Our research did not indicate this, and we distance ourselves fully from that statistic, which is likely to be wholly overstated. So there it is. That's how the British media works. The people that put together the research that the Daily Mail used to claim that 4 in 10 pupils were set to quit private school because of Labour's VAT policy have not only completely disowned the media coverage of their research, they've categorically stated that the research they conducted in no way delivered the conclusions that the Daily Mail and other members of the right-wing media have disseminated. Speaking of right-wing media, one wonders how they would have behaved if it had been a politician of a different ethnicity or a different background coming in for racist and misogynistic abuse from the mega donor, Frank Hester. We are talking about Diane Abbott. I could almost ask, how could anybody black vote for these people knowing that they were campaigning with his money? And I should add that a full list of candidates standing in that Hackney constituency can be found at lbc.co.uk/candidates. They won't let me have a jingle for Peur de Paranoia. So I'm going to have to sing my own, I think. But what Peur de Paranoia, if you're just tuning in, is what I feel every time someone starts talking about the election, including me, in ways that I'm not entirely confident about with regard to Ofcom rules covering balance and impartiality. Peur de paranoia, I've got a case of peur de paranoia. Something like that I thought would be quite nice, but everyone's looking at me as if I've taken leave of my senses, which perhaps I have. Let's get back to the grown-up conversation. Luckily, Margaret's in Enfield to do precisely that. Margaret, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, thank you, James, for taking my call.
You're welcome, Margaret.
I think it's more about you always trigger the emotion and the thought patterns that so many other people fail to kind of recognise.
Thank you.
And just hearing about this additional donation that has now been accepted by the Conservative Party, I felt so emotional about it. I was, hopefully not too upset in terms when I was speaking to the person when I called in. But honestly, James, I don't think people really understand what and how that has impacted so many black women. Me included.
Well, tell us.
To know that somebody would just find the thought of another person who's basically been a trailblazer like Diane Abbott has, and it's not whether I agree with politics or not, and I understand around the purdah stuff, but to know that they could say that they hate all black, it makes them want to hate all black women, but also to want to shoot her. I mean, I don't think people realise how dangerous that is and how frightening that is to me as a person.
Normal people do. I recognise that. I mean, frightening to you personally. I can't. I can understand that. I can realise that. I can't feel it because I'm not a black woman.
No, and just to know that they accepted that money and people were saying whether they will call for it to be taken back and that they've accepted more. I mean, I'm just appalled by it. I'm just wanting to know, and I wanted to say to people, why, what do you think of us as black women? Mm-hmm. I mean, come on now. I understand the police are supposed to be investigating, but why have they not called this man in to even just have a conversation about
I don't know the details about that, but yeah, I mean, you would imagine.
I'm just tired of it, James, really and truly.
Sorry.
I really am. I'm just, I'm like 50 plus years of age and I've been fighting this fight for a long time. And all I've ever wanted was to just have a level playing field, that people respect where I'm coming from, that respect where us as black women are trying to get to, and to give us that opportunity. And then we have people that are trying to justify that kind of language and behaviour. And I tell you, if it was any other cultural background, people would be outraged. People will be outraged.
Well,
and
people are outraged. People are outraged, but the outrage would be sufficient to prompt the Tories to give the money back.
But they're still taking the money. You cannot be that much outraged if you're still taking the money, because your political standing and power of empowerment, it means more to you than it does to have that moral obligation to say this is wrong and this is
no, it's worse than that, Margaret, because they did say it was wrong, but then they kept the money.
It's hypocritical, James, and that's all I'll say about that. It's easy to say it's wrong, but it's not easy to actually say, and we will also take the next further step, which will be more justifiable and not accept your money. We cannot accept your money.
They should
so it means nothing to me.
Put Frank Hester's money where their mouth is what they should do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm sorry this has hit you so personally, but I do understand why. And that's the point that Diane Abbott made this morning when she described it as an insult to all black women. So trying to imagine, there are limits to empathy. I can walk a mile in your shoes, but I can never be you. I'm trying to imagine how I would be on the receiving end of this, and it's impossible. I'm a white, straight, middle-class, privately educated man. I'm Teflon when it comes to that kind of public abuse. I'll give you an example. Jean's been in touch. Jean has written, let me get this right, I'm not going to be able to find it now because my inbox is so busy. But I get here's one. You are just a Starmer moon boy who hates his country, maybe because you are ginger. So, that's just funny, right? Bless his little cotton socks. So I can't imagine, I don't think I can imagine a personal attack, an attack upon a politician that would hurt me personally. Because how could it? Who's ever going to say he makes me hate all white men? And if someone did say that, they'd just sound ridiculous. Because we are pretty much everywhere. That's the bit that you can't communicate, I don't think. You can either feel it or not feel it. And that's why the people who presumably feel it in some way, black conservative voters, most obviously, black female conservative voters most specifically, it's incredible to me. It's incredible to me that they would hang on to this money and that the media would treat the story with much less attention than they do Angela Rayner's 15-year-old housing arrangements or Keir Starmer's curry. It's sick, actually, is what it is. Tiffany's in Westminster. Tiffany, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'd like to say that I am tired, I'm irritated, and I'm over it, frankly, as someone who is going to be voting, unfortunately, in the next 2 weeks. I think the reason why I'm irritated, and I agree that it's an insult, is because the other day there was a whole furor about protecting women and girls. The Tories want to protect women and girls, but putting them first. However, a certain demographic doesn't deserve that protection, and because there's £5 million on the line. I think it makes all of 15 even, actually, yeah. I think it makes all of their policies laughable, frankly. And also, I'm just not really here for when Labour eventually do use this as a point-scoring exercise when we've only just recently got over their Diane's re-election scandal. Yeah. And misogyny is just so rife, and that's the reason why I'm tired, because it's a part of our daily life, and to see it play out in politics as somebody who has been described as a trailblazer and somebody who just wants to do their job is a joke. I still can't get over her standing up 40 times.
Waiting to speak on this issue in the House of Commons.
On this issue, she never got a chance to. I think it's a joke. And I'll answer your question. The reason they haven't returned the money is because they don't care. It's because it doesn't matter to them. And I think it's hilarious how, Tories will break ranks and cross the floor and flee the ship if it's to protect their seats. However, they would do that to protect any of the demographic, like a particular demographic in their constituency. And I've never had much time for Kenny Badenoch, if I'm being really real with you. Sure. And I just think that it's laughable. Who am I supposed to vote for? Who's going to protect my interests? You want to protect women and girls? What about this black woman? What about this black girl? If you can accept money from somebody that said, it makes me hate all black women, and I think this particular one should be shot in the street, what does that say about this? What does that say about the culture of whatever political party we're going to elect in 2 weeks?
It's not 2 weeks. You've just given me a panic attack. I think we've got about 4 weeks until until we get to the actual ballot. But I guess that's what's called splitting hairs. That's it, isn't it? It's this message that it sends way beyond Diane Abbott. And you're right to bring the Labour Party's absolute car crash of a case of the way that they've treated her in recent months, but that bit, it never gets past it. Here's the thing, Tiffany, and I don't offer up this as any comfort to you or consolation, but I think if he'd donated 50 grand, they'd have given it back.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because if you look at the state of their finances, he is by far the biggest donor. I think possibly the last thing I saw, he's like more than half of all the donations they've received in the last year or two. So that without his money, that they'd be up on bricks, perhaps. But I do believe if he donated 50 grand, they'd have given it back because they know it's wrong, but they've prioritised cash over principle.
I just think they don't care.
I
think any small amount, they don't care. It's not a pertinent enough sort of polling thing that will sway where they are in the votes at the minute. I genuinely just think they don't care. I don't think any amount would have been an issue. And I think that especially when the poor sort of legacies of Joe Cox and David Ames. People were calling, Nigel Farage got milkshake the other day, and people were invoking their name, saying, it's not right to, violence against an MP in whatever sort of retrospect. And it's just like, what is this not? Is this not the
of
same?
a whole different order, and from someone who can presumably still slide into the VIP sections at Conservative events. That word I keep hearing is tired, and I do understand it. I'm not sure I did when I first heard it, but it's almost a kind of existential exhaustion. When will it ever end? When will it ever end? As an earlier caller said, a level playing field. How can a level playing field still feel so far out of reach for people? And the answer is, in this case, Frank Hester. It's 11:51. Do you want to know something funny? My mug has become a cult. I should say cup, shouldn't I? My cup is now a cult. My mug, yesterday, every 6 months or so, one of our clips it contains me taking a sip of tea from my, frankly, ginormous mug. It's an obscenely large mug. It's partly a joke because I everything in the studio is branded. Everything is because we're proper professional broadcasters, so everything's LBC branded. And I like a particularly large mug because of the tea that I drink. I put a flowering tea ball in a cup, and then I can top it up. But it means I can drink it. I like it cold as well. It's just perfect for me. But then of course the boss insisted that I have a brand, but none of them were big enough. So I think partly to shut me up, they commissioned a mug that is so enormously huge I can't possibly complain that it's not big enough, and therefore, I mean, it looks like something from an Alice in Wonderland theme park after she's eaten the shrink me cake or drunk the shrink me potion. But every now and then, someone who's not noticed the mug before notices it on a clip, and occasionally above that then goes viral. So the star of LBC's most successful clip of the month so far is some crockery. That is it. That's the story. And I can't really describe to you why it's so funny when you see it. It's because I say big mug, and you in your mind there are parameters on how big the mug is, and then you see the mug next to my head, which isn't small. You see the mug next to my head, and it becomes immediately funny because you could not conceive of a mug that big. It's the biggest mug in the world. And I love this comment. So the Poke website have now written up the story of my mug. But this comment, which I'd missed the first time round, says, I think this is true. There must be some law of physics, this is by Mike, that describes how there is literally no way to be prepared for this. As much as your brain has pictured that mug at that size, you can't comprehend it until it's next to someone's face. And I think he's right. I think it's so huge that you kind of think, it'll be a big mug. It'll be like one of those Sports Direct mugs or something like that, like a big mug from Tiger which says Dad of the Year on it or something. That was my old mug, by the way. But no, it's absolutely enormous. So I don't know why. I just thought I'd share that with you. Mystery Hour around the corner. Before that, a very important conversation, much more important than my mug, about Frank Hester and this sick story about them keeping the money. I don't think it's a particularly interesting angle to wonder whether they'd have given back a smaller amount, but I think they probably would have done, but that's not really relevant to the bigger picture. Lorraine is in Bromley. Lorraine, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
What I want to say is it's disappointing to what's happened.
Yes.
It's upsetting what's happened,
yes.
But in a way, I'm pleased it's come out in the public because this incident of what's happened with Frank Hester is symbolic of what happens in society and where black women are viewed. And I know you say you don't want to use the term hierarchy of racism, but in addition to being black, there's also that female aspect, that gender aspect. And as a black woman, you do feel a sense that you kind of are at the bottom of the pecking order. Yeah. And it's almost like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You cry because something's wrong. You're not seen as a strong woman. Yeah. You then respond to what's going on, and you rightly so get angry or upset. You're angry.
Yes.
And the number of aggressive incidences that I've experienced quite often have been from white men.
Yes.
And I just think that what's happened is symbolic of how we are viewed and how we are treated, and the aggression that I've received in a workplace, from neighbours, on the train. That's what happens on a daily. And I think, the money incident and Frank Hester is what black women have been saying for a really long time. So the fact that it's come out in the public, it's almost like this is evidence of what we have been saying for a very, very long time.
Except that
evidence
it's
of our invisibility and not being listened to.
Yeah, because I think Lorraine, if you had phoned me up in February and asked me a hypothetical question about whether or not the Tories would keep money from a donor if it emerged that he had said, Diane Abbott makes me hate all black women and I think she should be shot, I don't think I would have spent very long thinking about it. And I don't know whether this is going to annoy you or not. I would have said, yeah, they'll definitely give it back. They can't keep it. It's so gross. It's so disgusting. It's so grim.
It is. But when people are saying these are their experiences, you saying, I can't believe that, they'll give it back, is exactly how we are not believed, not heard, not understood. It's just symbolic of what that is. So,
no, I would have believed that it would happen. I wouldn't have said, no, there's no way a Tory donor would ever say that. I wouldn't have dismissed that. I would have doubted that they'd keep the money. And I think in other circumstances and other periods in recent history, they would have given the money back. I really do think that.
Yeah, well...
But we'll never know.
Yeah, and also, in terms of the Labour Party, I wouldn't vote for the Labour Party either because of everything that's happened. And I think that would have been a really, really good opportunity for Keir Starmer actually to support Diane Abbott immediately after this, what was said.
She still didn't have the whip, did she, that
and
day?
This just, and so therefore I have no respect for any of them, neither Kemi Badenoch. She doesn't speak for a lot of the black community.
She doesn't claim to be fair, Lorraine, and nor does she have to.
No, well, she doesn't, but fine, she doesn't have to, but not a lot.
So
she doesn't get a lot of support from us.
No, she called it out unequivocally racist, but I can't find reference to what she said about the money. So you're homeless politically then?
Called it out. Well, she called it out unequivocally. You know why?
Why?
Because of her own position. She is so volatile where she is, and it could happen to her. So it would be really dangerous if she decided to sit on that
and to say nothing,
being so blatant, and nothing happened. Because what she would want is for people to outcry if it happened to her.
Well, and we would, wouldn't we? We would.
Position.
But we would be. There would be outcry. We would be just as disgusted if a Labour donor had made these comments about a black Conservative politician. The problem is that the Conservatives were not disgusted enough to give that money back, which means that every single one of them out on the stoop, every single one. I mean, how many leaflets would have been paid for by Frank Hester's money? How many badges, how many rosettes would have been paid for by Frank Hester's filthy money? I don't know the answer to that question. It might be none. It might have gone another way. It might have done something else. But that is what every caller this hour has sort of extrapolated from Diane Abbott's treatment in this case, the treatment that they have experienced throughout their lives, which is why the word to appear most often in the testimonies was tired. Lorraine, thank you. My apologies to Teresa and Zalika and Rosalind and others and Perry. I won't have time to get to you today, but I will find ways back to this. We'll find ways back to this story because I feel it's actually really important. I'm not the Daily Mail. I don't have the heft or the power that they have. But if they can give 13 front pages to Keir Starmer's curry, then we can find our way back to Frank Hester's racism and the abominable treatment of Diane Abbott, even if it's not really generating coverage anywhere else. But up next, time for some silliness.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Oh, 3 minutes after 12 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are about to embark upon your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. It's very straightforward. You have a little mystery burrowed somewhere in your brain, and it's time to let it out in the hope that somebody else will know the answer to your question, will have the solution to your mystery, will be able to unravel your riddle, rescue your enigma. But the first thing you've got to do is ring in. The number is always the same, 0345 6060 973. And then you ring in with the answer if you know it, but you must know it. I haven't needed this rule for a while, but there is actually a rule. You're not supposed to look stuff up. That's the rule. That's the only real rule of Mystery Hour. We used to have rules about being boring, but that was all a bit pot kettle black, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, so we don't do that anymore. So obviously that you've got to know the answer to the question before it's asked, if you see what I mean. And then you ring in with it, and I say, what are your qualifications? And you say, oh, well, I've got a PhD in applied mathematics. Or, oh, I saw it on the telly last night, James. Or my daughter asked me this question last week at bedtime, and so I looked it up. But you can't look it up now. Do you see? Anyway, that's what qualifications mean. It doesn't mean, I've got a bag of gymnastics award 4 or something like that. So it's all good. And if you are my favourite contributor of the day, you get a Mystery Hour board game. Management's decision is final. Full terms and conditions are at lbc.co.uk. Mystery Hour board game has its own website at mysteryhour.co.uk. It's a really good game. What it does, it takes from the archive a bunch of questions, hundreds of questions, and it provides a right answer and a wrong answer and a space for you to make up your own wrong answer. Now, this is crucial. People who have played the game and succeeded, huge fortunes have been won and lost playing Mystery Hour. Ocean-going yachts have ended up in the pot playing Mystery Hour. Whoa! But crucially, if you want to become what I call a Mystery Hour maestro, if you want to become a Mystery Hour maestro, the trick is in the made-up question. So you give yourself a little bit of time at the beginning to come up with a really good one. Personally, I would write it down so that it's clear that you're reading it. If it looks like you're making it up as you go along, then it will stand out from the right answer and the scripted wrong answer. So you get a right answer, a wrong answer, and room for your own answer. And the way to get maximum points is to persuade other people playing that the one you made up is the correct answer. So the more plausible your made-up answer is. So the wrong answer can be plausible. Sometimes it's just funny. But the more plausible your wrong answer is, the more likely you are to win the game. And in order to win your own game, just make a brilliant contribution today. And you find out more about the game, as I said, at mysteryhour.co.uk. I'll take this. I don't normally read texts on the during this hour of the programme because we've got so much to get through. But Chris Rupp writes, politics. I've just realised the election is on July the 4th. It's a Thursday. The nation needs to know what will happen to Mystery Hour. Chris, you've not been paying attention. We can't talk about the election on July the 4th. Elections are always on Thursdays, and Mystery Hour was invented on a Thursday, on an election day, in order to give us at least 1 hour in which we didn't really run the risk of satisfying our political paranoia. I've got paranoia. Everybody still clear about yes? And I like this as well. James, start giving out giant LBC mugs with the board games. Spread the love. No, it's my mark. No, we might do some merch. Who knows? 12:07 is the time. Should we get going? I think we should. Baljit's in Maidenhead. Baljit, question or answer?
I have a question for you, James.
Carry on, mate.
Firstly, loving the show.
Thank you. It's all right.
And I would love one of your big mugs if you're going.
Well,
but anyway,
there's a lot of this. Do you know who the really funny people are?
Go on.
The ones who reply to the clip and they say something like, "Oh yeah, there is a big mug in that clip, and also a big cup." Or something. Do you see? They're hilarious. I think they're hilarious because that's really Anyway, on we go.
Right. So my question is: I've noticed over the last probably a couple of years, maybe a bit longer, that when you see particularly Tory politicians on the news, Question Time in news clips, and they're trying to make a point, they hold their hands in a really weird way. So I think I noticed it with Michael Gove initially, and when I was describing it to your colleague, it's almost like their hand is closed. So I'm doing my left hand at the moment. So if your hand is closed, almost like there's got a pool cue or a racket being held in it.
In my left hand?
In your left hand. It could be all right. They sometimes do both.
Right. And whereabouts is it? How high up is it on my torso?
Oh, it's right-angled. So your elbow's sort of right-angled. And they almost like you're pointing.
But is the top half of is down by my side? The top half of my arm is down by my side, and so like I'm pointing, but my fist is clenched, so it's going out. Like this is why I'm going to stand up for the people enjoying this on YouTube. So it's like this, Baljet. I've got my arm is by my side, my fist is clenched, and my arm is coming out from my side at a right angle.
Yes, and but your fist is clenched in an open sort of way with your thumb on top of your index finger.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah,
okay.
And they point like that, and I see it on the news. On Question Time, etc., quite a lot. And I want to know where it comes from.
So is the index finger pointing out from the fist, or is it level with all the other fingers?
No, it's a bit level with the others.
Yeah, it's not. It's like this then. So and they use it and they do this, do they? They kind of stress the points. They go, yes, and I'll tell you another thing. Da 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 da. And it's okay. And you think they're all doing it in the same way?
Mostly Tory politicians. That's the only ones I've seen where I've noticed it. And part of the reason for ringing was to think, well, if Labour do have a big majority when they come in, we might not see too many Tory politicians on the news, and therefore it might die out. So I want to know, where does it come from, and what do they think it conveys? Because for me, it just looks really unnatural.
Well, they did that thing. Do you remember when they did the power stance? About 10 years ago, George Osborne they kept being filmed looking really awkward. Now, I'm terrible posture-wise. I look, this is why I'm so happy on the radio, Baljet. I can look absolutely ridiculous. My posture is unbelievably awful. It sometimes looks like I've melted into a chair when I'm conducting an interview. And I'm awkward as well. I'm physically awkward. I'm not a graceful person. So I'm well aware of the pot kettle black element here, but my God, they look so stupid. Theresa May as well. It was like they'd been taught to sort of hold their arms back. And do you remember? So it's probably some form of media training. And a few people agreeing with you that Michael Gove, Martin says, yeah, he's right. Me and the wife hate it. And Greg says, Gove started it. Elisa says,
that's where I probably saw it first, and I see it all the time. There was this guy, Bim Alaf, whatever his name is now.
Yes. Well, it's the same as it's always been. I think it's Alafalumi. Bim Alafalumi, I think. I haven't got it in front of me.
And he does it quite a lot. And it just looks so unnatural. And you just think, you're drawing attention, or my attention now is drawn all the time to their hands. But you just don't look like you look like you're
Blair used to do it, apparently. Blair used to do it, but he had his finger pointing out the top. It was like a weird... Doing it to be less aggressive, maybe? So they're not pointing? Because if you point, you can look quite... Who did the pointing in a debate? Wasn't there someone did a lot of pointing? It might have been Sunak, actually, with Liz Truss. Anyway, you're on... So it's like a clenched hand...
Loosely
clenched hand stress point, as it were.
Yes. Yeah, and like an emphasis point.
Yeah, you're right. That's the word I was looking for. You're on. I'd be amazed if we get an answer, but I've enjoyed our conversation enormously. Take care, Baljet. Mind how you go. Perry's in Canary Wharf. Perry, question or answer?
Hi, James. Good afternoon. I've got a question for you.
Thank you, Perry.
I recently turned 60, actually.
Congratulations.
And, thank you very much. And for the past half of a century, 50 years, I've been thinking about this question on or off.
Yes.
And the question is simply, in a tube of Smarties, and they come in all sorts of different colours,
yes.
Why is it that orange is the only one that has a flavour that is not the generic chocolate? So orange actually tastes like orange, at least it does to me. Terry's chocolate orange, it tastes of orange. But none of the other flavours, yellow
it's different. Like... Terry's chocolate orange doesn't taste like an orange Smartie.
Correct. It's got a more acute orange flavour, if anything. But nonetheless, the orange...
But I mention that because I know why. I know that bit why.
Well, you might come up with the answer then. But how come orange is... Well, let's just say orange is the only one that taste of anything that you could describe by its colour. I mean, the red doesn't taste of strawberry, the green doesn't taste of lime, the yellow doesn't taste of lemon. Why do they just make one colour?
There's four more. The brown does taste of chocolate, but that's not the point, is it?
Yeah.
Purple doesn't taste of
that's not
aubergine.
It's not the case with...
well, I don't know how to answer the question. I know why orange Smarties have a flavour, and I know why it's a different flavour from the Terry's chocolate orange, but I don't know. I mean, it's an odd question because why do the other 7 not have a flavour? Why does it's just the way they made it.
Yeah, but somebody must have decided orange ones. Let's make that flavoursome. But all the others, let's not worry about them.
Yeah, okay. No, well, that's what I mean. It wouldn't be. I don't think it's discrimination against the other 7 Smarties. I think it's more. Well, we can do this. So, because anyway, just to show off my completely useless knowledge, it's in the shell. The flavour. It's not in the chocolate. Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. Otherwise, they'd have to have a separate production line for orange Smarties. Yeah. Whereas in fact, they just split them up.
Exactly. Let's go and get the special chocolate specifically for that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but then you couldn't you? You could make a flavour for the yellow. You can make a flavour for the shell, couldn't you? And they can all be different flavours.
No, you could. So I'm just showing off that tiny little bit of Smarties-based knowledge that I have. And with the Terry's chocolate orange, obviously there's no shell, so the orange oil is in the chocolate. But why do orange Smarties have a flavour? We could have a problem here.
Uh-oh.
What if only Smarties have the answer?
Mr. Smarties might have to phone in.
That would be a Ray Liotta. I wouldn't. How high up in the Smarties empire would you have to be to get a Ray Liotta if you ring in to answer this? I mean, who invented the Smartie?
It would have to be Gary Smartie himself.
Gary Smartie, yes, exactly. Or Marty Smartie. Marty Smartie. It's on the list. Why are only orange Smarties flavoured, as it were? But we'll find out. And the hand clenching or the soft pointing or whatever you want to call it, where does it come from? 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
I love this job so much. It's ridiculous. 12:17 is the time, and a special shout out to Martin Smart, who has just WhatsApped us, which means I can actually see his full name and indeed his history. So I know that he has not just sort of set up or changed his name on his WhatsApp account to pretend to be called Martin Smart, so Marty Smarty, or very, very nearly Marty Smarty there in Ray Liotta territory, if indeed the inventor of Smarties were to ring in and tell us why the orange one is flavoured. And lots of possibilities on Baljit's question. I think power thumb might actually be an acceptable, like the consensual phrase. Power thumb, but do we know where it came from? Is it a deliberate taught thing? The politicians sort of soft hand clench to emphasise a point, points of emphasis, but definitely no pointing. James is in Southampton. James, question or answer?
Question. I'll just say that the Smarties joke at the end before the ad break, that was the second big laugh out loud moment of the week on your show, I must say.
What was the first one? I'm intrigued now.
It was James in Durham on Wednesday,
Lord.
Tuesday.
Yeah, bless him.
I think you said, policemen outnumber people on the street. You said, everyone's outnumbered by policemen.
It doesn't matter what street you're on. Yeah, that was an unfortunate moment, but thank you. Anyway, where? What's your question?
Okay, so it's gardening related today. So I've been buying some plants to put in the garden, and when you go to the garden centre to look on the list, it gives you like a rough estimate of how likely the size they like to grow to.
I was buying some roses, and it literally says small creeper, medium creeper, high creeper.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the sizes to plan how many I can fit into my bed, and that made me wonder when does the plant actually know when to stop growing? The plant can't just conform.
I was thinking exactly the same thing on Sunday or Monday when I was down at the garden centre.
Yeah, if you give it all the right nutrients and the sunlight and what it needs, then what's there to stop it from just continuing to grow?
But they can do. I mean, that's the same rose, the same flower, and 3 different things for sale in the same garden centre, promising that it will end up being 3 different sizes.
Yeah,
it's incredible, isn't it? So how do they know? How does the plant know to stop growing, as it were?
How does the plant producer now as well.
Yeah, you're on. All right, I like that. Thank you, James. 0345 606 0973 is the number to call. I'd like to give a shout out to Enzo, who has his ice cream van parked in the car park at the garden centre that I go to. I bumped into him the other day. We had a cup of tea together when I was buying climbing roses. This is the kind of content that you're coming for, isn't it? This is the big stuff. This is the heavy stuff. Phil's in Crawley. Phil, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Phil.
As we know, there are 24 hours in a day.
Yes.
When they invented the clock back in 1650 or whatever, why did the clock only go up to 12?
Yeah.
Well,
is this a brilliant question or a silly one?
Well, I mean, if the clock had twice as many numbers on it, then we wouldn't have 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd just have 13 o'clock, 14 o'clock, 15 o'clock.
That's the first line of 1984, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah. I'm not that educated, as you know, James.
I don't know. Don't be silly. It's just you only have to read the first line, Phil. You don't have to read the whole book.
That'd be daunting enough for me.
I think it's something like it was a cold April morning and the clock was striking 13 or something like that, which obviously it grabs you immediately because you go, hey, aye, something's going on here.
So that it could be a valid question then, James.
Yeah, I guess it could, but I mean, why did the first clocks not have 24 numbers on them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all right, you're on. Let's see how we get on with that one. Cheers, Phil. Just mind how you go. 21 minutes after 12. Why did the first clocks not have 24 numbers on them? Remember, if you can answer any of these, 0345 606 0973 is the number that you need. Alex is in Banbury. Alex, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
So I've been helping my son do some biology revision because he's been doing his GCSEs at the moment.
Oh, yes.
We've been looking at reproduction, and I want to know what makes the Y sperm swim faster than the X sperm to get to the egg. Because the egg is an X with the chromosomes.
Yeah.
So you need XX to make a female, to make a baby girl, and XY to make a baby boy. So depending on where the egg is, depends whether you get a boy or a girl, because the Y sperm swim fast and get there quickly and then die off.
Right.
Whereas the X ones swim for longer, so you can get further up. So if the egg's at the top, you'll get a baby girl, if that makes sense.
I had no idea.
But I want to know why the X...
Hang on a minute, I'm just absorbing this. I'm just absorbing this news. Did you know that before you started revising this time round?
I did, to be fair.
Well, we had IVF, and no one ever explained this to me. You'd have thought you'd have got top quality sperm information if you're actually going through the IVF process. So there's like two types of sperm: X sperm and Y sperm.
Yeah, because the egg is always an X, so you either get XX to make a baby girl.
Oh, I know, I understand all that. How could it be differently? I'm sounding very stupid now, Alex, and you're very politely not pointing it out. So why does the Y sperm swim faster?
Yeah,
well, isn't that the same as? Go on. Longer tail.
I was going to say, has it got a bigger tail? Is it actually grown to have more? Well, it wouldn't have muscle, but is it more mitochondria, so it's got more energy in it, or?
Blimey, you're good. You've really taken on board this biology revision, haven't you? Okay. So I like it. Why does the Y sperm swim faster than the X sperm? I didn't know any of that. I mean, to be fair, I did a biology GCSE in 1988, and I haven't helped mine with that one. But we shall try and get you an answer. 23 minutes after 12 is the time, and good luck in the exam if he hasn't done it already. Matt's in Solihull. Matt, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Yes.
I'll tell you what, there's been some good questions so far, so the bar's been set quite high.
Yes, I know. You sound as if you're worried you might not clear it.
Oh, no, the smarty one got me. So we're having a barbecue at the weekend, and my nephew walked up to me and he pointed to my arm and he said, my mum's got that mark on her arm and my dad. Yeah. And when I looked down, he was pointing at where I'd had my TB jab.
Oh, I thought it was going to be your West Brom tattoo.
And it got me thinking, why is the TB jab the only jab, as far as I'm aware, that leaves a lasting scar? I mean, I'm 44, I'm still scarred. I gabbed a flu jab every year. I had the COVID jab, everything. None have left a scar, but the TB jab, I bet we've all got it. If we all look at our arms, it's there.
what is it in that injection? Because I don't remember it being some brutal needle.
It was. I remember it being a bit more painful than other jabs. Because obviously I was at school. You'd try and hit everyone on their jab mark, so it hurt even more.
I remember everyone telling us that it was absolutely painful. So the night before, I was pinching my arm to try and get used to the pain. And then when it had happened, I realised I actually caused more damage through pinching it than the actual injection itself.
Yeah. No, well, you're on. I like that question. So, and that is the only one it leaves. It leaves a noticeable mark, a noticeable scar. So it must have something to do with what's in the vaccine itself, rather than the nature of the vaccination process. It's not the needle that's doing it, because other needles don't, unless it's a massive needle. But like you say, I don't remember that being the case. Thank you, Matt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions on the board now. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Remember, I'm constantly thinking of winners. Who is likely to get the free or the prize, the Mystery Hour board game prize. At the moment, I don't know that there's a standout candidate, is there? I might let you decide one week. Carla is in Ludgershall, I think, in Wiltshire. Carla, question or answer?
I have an answer.
Oh, carry on.
So your caller that was talking about the politicians holding their fist and with their thumb down, it's called the pointless point. And it's a way of emphasising the point you're making without pointing your finger, because that's shown to be aggressive.
And where does it come from?
I have no idea, but I did a A-level in communication studies, and it was one of my projects was on politicians' body language.
Oh, really?
So we did a lot of that, yeah. Tony Blair did loads of it.
And Bill Clinton did as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
But they must be getting it trained, and we're trained into them, this modern generation. I'll read this out, because you've already provided the answer, but Sarah gives a little bit more detail. She says, I think it's a gesture that was practiced by classical rhetoricians like Cicero. And were taught to gesture to make points. And we had at school old copies of the Latin primer, and there'd be an image of Cicero in there in full flow, doing a similar sort of power thumb gesture. So it would, I probably got clocked a long, long time ago that it makes you see, you don't lose the power of emphasis, but you don't seem to be aggressive. And your qualifications are you got an A-level in communication studies. So there you go. It's finally come in useful, Carla.
Yeah.
Round of applause.
I waited a long time for that.
Yes, well, it was worth it. There we go. And that's off the list. Thank you very much indeed. And that was the first question asked as well. So the first question asked is the first question answered. Frank's in Carlisle. Frank, question or answer?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
It's about airships. I wanted to know how long is it going to be before we can fly places on airships instead of planes? Because there was that Airlander. Do you remember the flying buttocks, they called it, about 3 or 4 years ago?
No.
And that seemed to get a lot of press, that this was going to be the next thing in flight.
Really?
Yeah, because it uses helium, so it doesn't need as much in terms of energy. It's better for environmental concerns.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's probably going to be a bit slower.
Doesn't it take ages, though?
Well, yeah, but I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, if you're on an airship, I would assume you've got a bit more space to move around. You know, it's going to be a steadier flight. I don't know. I'm curious about where it's at.
But I'm curious about why you think it was. It's like that's the direction of traffic, if you pardon the pun, that we're heading towards, that there's a genuine effort afoot to replace a lot of air travel with airship travel.
Well, it was in the news a few years ago, and it seemed to be quite a popular thing.
I don't know if I can Google flying buttocks on the work computer, because Sheila might come in and look at my search history.
It was called the Airlander. That was its official name.
Not really supposed to Google during Mystery Hour, but it's a question, not an answer. So it's not like I'm going to try and answer it. Is it the Airlander 10? It was called.
Yeah, so I'm just curious as to whether or not people are still pursuing this.
Yeah. Well, that's a good. Is it a thing? I mean,
it's an environmentally more friendly way than.
You'd think so,
because everybody says air travel is one of the worst things, don't they?
Yeah, for the planet. So is there a prospect of airships becoming a meaningful option, a meaningful option? Yeah, I like that. I often think about hovercrafts. God, that sounded so Alan Partridge. I often think about hovercrafts. But I do, because I thought by now we'd all have little hovercrafts. I thought that was the way that the world was going when I watched Tomorrow's World as a kid. And actually hardly anyone, even if you can't even get a hovercraft. I think they've just proved to be too inefficient energy-wise. But being able to float over water and land, when I was about 10, that seemed to me to be a fantastic idea. And I think wasn't there someone in Barnes in South London who had a hovercraft and they could drive it to work on the river and on the road? Sorry, I'm just having a bit of a moment live in the studio. Jenny Balsby here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
33 minutes after 12 is the time. You can still get a hovercraft to the Isle of Wight. Sorry. Sometimes I have a moment where I imagine a mythical listener just tuning in. Like precisely that moment. And of course, if you hear me coming back from the news, so you say, hi, and it's 33 minutes after 12, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And then I presume you were listening before the break and take up a conversation. It's normally quite straightforward, but occasionally I must sound absolutely tragic. It's like you come back, you've just turned on your radio, you come back from a news bulletin and the presenter says, apparently you can still get a hovercraft to the Isle of Wight. I'm back, presumably. What's he talking about? Never mind. It's about 3 times quicker than the ferry, Cliff tells me. It's an appropriate name. I'll stop now. Will's in Colchester. Will, question or answer?
It's an answer to the plant question.
Oh, lovely. Carry on.
So on a plant label, there'll be a height and a width.
Yes.
And depending on who's produced that, it will either be the final height and the final width, which is what we all really want, but quite a lot of books actually tell you the height in 10 years when it's for trees.
Oh, yeah.
Which is nice, but it doesn't ever explain that. That's the trouble. And obviously we know the height because we've grown them and then...
So it's like humans then, in a way. I mean, we know when to stop growing. So it just... So you've just...
Yeah, they will eventually get to a final height, but the actual labels, because you can pick one book and it will say 5 metres and another book will say 10 metres, and you think, well, which one's right? Well, they probably both are. It's just one is in 10 years' time. And
one's gone. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like how long is a piece of string? But in the garden centre, when I'm buying my climbing rose, they got 3 different types then? If it's the same rose.
Well, that's it. It's different. You know, one might be in 5 years' time. One might be.
No, that can't. No, it's the same rose, mate.
Yes, I know, but
they're in a row.
Different.
A row of roses.
I know.
And they're not massively different in size at this point in the process. That's the bit I don't get.
That's the problem with plant heights. It's to be interpreted. It's not.
No, I'm not taking it. Hang on, I better check what your qualifications are before I start poo-pooing your answer. What are your qualifications, Will?
Well, I've done this all my life. My dad's done this all his life. We've got a garden centre in Colchester.
Oh.
We grow trees, shrubs, hedging, and send it all over the UK.
Yeah, all right. I won't poo-poo your answer in that case. You clearly know of what you speak.
Well, it's a problem that you find in our industry, that depending on who you ask. I know there's one tree company, I won't mention their name, and they got sued because a tree was bigger than what it said in the book, and now if you go to all their books, they're all inflated.
Oh, really? So that's to protect themselves against someone going, if I come to your garden centre, and I'm looking for a nice climbing rose.
Yeah.
David Austin actually was the one I went for.
Well, they'd be very nice.
Very nice.
They are the
cream of the crop. The cream of the crop, aren't they? Literally, not the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop. And I found the one I like. I found the flyer, and it says small climber, medium climber, large climber.
Yeah.
What is the difference between those 3 plants?
There isn't an answer for that.
There must be.
Ridiculous. It's not like clothes where medium is size 12.
But there must be an answer because they're there in front of me.
Yeah. But it's
or
medium.
Maybe they're not. Maybe I've misremembered.
It's small in relation to what it is, because a small oak tree and a small rose is 2 different smalls.
We're doing philosophy now, Will. I wasn't expecting that. Doing philosophical relativism. So maybe I've misremembered. Maybe they were just different climbers.
One was
not 3 variants of the same thing.
Meters,
what role does rootstock play in growth over
that's a bit like the engine in the car. You can have a Ferrari with a little engine in it.
Yeah.
Which is what they do with fruit trees, because you can't climb up ladders anymore to pick fruit. So you've got the same variety of fruit tree, just with a smaller rootstock, so the plant doesn't get so big.
Well, that's part of the answer then. So you'd graft it to that rootstock, and you'd have a fair idea of what sort of size it was going to be.
Yeah, or you can go the opposite. You can get a plant that's very nice and produces very nice apples, but is quite dwarf. You can stick a very vigorous rootstock in it and effectively tune it to be a bigger plant.
I think you've got over the line. Can I ask you for some personal advice?
Go on.
I've got a damson tree.
Yeah.
But when we bought the house, the garden was a complete jungle, and you think that I'm exaggerating. You're thinking, I bet it wasn't that bad. It was worse. It was it was no one had touched it for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
So what had happened is that in order to survive, the damson tree has elongated, so it's got an incredibly long trunk to get it out of all the undergrowth.
It's stretched.
It has stretched. And I mean, obviously, that's not good. It doesn't look good, and the fruits are a bit rubbish. Is there any way to rescue that damson tree, Will?
It's a bit difficult to try and get a decent shape into it once it's already extended. That's the trouble. You might be better off sacrificing it and starting again with one that's obviously of a good shape.
That's what we thought. So I have noticed this summer that it's started. There are some small sproutings coming out much lower down.
Suckers from the bottom,
Yeah. Is it worth chopping off the top bit and seeing whether or not the little new bits turn into a tree?
The problem that you have with prunus is that it weeps. It doesn't heal very well.
Oh, really?
When they're big. It's a bit like an 80-year-old person having an operation and a 10-year-old.
I did not know that. It's very thin. The trunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it would still weep, would it?
If you're not careful, the fruit trees are generally, grown to produce loads of fruit, so there's loads of sap. That's one of the problems, that they don't heal up very well.
Of course, that makes part. Oh, I've enjoyed this chat, Will. Thank you.
Good.
Would you like a round of applause?
I'd love one. It'll be my second one, funnily enough.
Look at that.
There we go.
Ring.
Nice one. Thank you.
Do you want to mention the garden centre, or are you already rushed off your feet?
You can do. No, it's Hedging Plants Direct.
We're
all over the UK, so yeah.
Nice one.
No, very.
I may have a look. I may have a look later, depending on what we decide to do next in the garden. Thank you, Will. Ben's in Leigh-on-Sea. Ben, question or answer?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Just imagining all the law cases that are now going to come up because trees have grown too big.
Yes, it would be. It's an odd thing to sue over, but if it was like baking a patio or something like that, or spoiling your house, and you'd been promised it wasn't going to get bigger than
coming through into your basement or whatever.
It's precisely that. Anyway.
Right. Yes. My question. So on Sunday, the 26th of May, I took part in the London 100 bike ride.
Yes.
And didn't have time to do a lot of training before then, but never mind. The day after, I felt fine, was all good. And then from the Tuesday onwards, my legs and the pain got progressively worse as the muscle ache. So why is there a sort of a 24-hour delay?
You get a day off. You get a sort of hiatus, and you think to yourself,
bank holiday.
You think yes, exactly that.
Bank holiday, I'd have been more.
I think I've got away with it. You say. You think to yourself, I've got away with it. I thought I'd be in a lot more.
Yeah.
I think I'd be in a lot more pain than I am. And then the next day, holy moly, you can barely get out of bed.
Yep, it's like when you go to the gym and any sort of exercise where you push yourself, there's always that 24-hour window.
Yeah, I like that. What is the 24-hour hiatus after serious exercise? What's that all about?
Yeah.
Nice one, Ben. How did you get on in the run?
It was a ride, James. I
ride, sorry.
I didn't fall off this time, so that was good. Yeah,
well done. That's nice.
No, thank you.
I got a terrible habit of when people do a charity run or a charity bike ride or a charity race like that. I always ask them if they won. So Henry Riley did the marathon and he did ever so well and he got a great time. And I came in on the Monday like a clever class. I said, "Oh, did you win?" It's not even funny. It's like a pure dad joke, isn't it? But anyway, you didn't.
He probably set a personal best and then suddenly felt really bad.
I know. It's pathetic, really. Absolutely pathetic. Thank you, Ben, and well done. 12:42 is the time. Kelly's in Doncaster. Kelly, question or answer?
It's an answer, James,
for
the TB vaccine.
Yes.
So most other vaccines are given into the muscle, but the difference with the TB vaccine is that it's given just under the skin.
Subcutaneously?
Yes. I think the actual term is intradermally.
Oh.
Between the layers of the skin.
Right.
And it'll bubble up and blister, particularly because you're given a live sort of dose of the infection. so your body can develop antibodies for it.
Got it.
So that's why it bubbles up and blisters, and other vaccines don't.
Oh, so that's quite simple then.
Yeah.
So it's about where, it's not
simple.
what it is or how it's administered, it's about where it is administered to.
Yeah, exactly. And it leaves obviously a small scar, and it makes it easier in the future for you to obviously check if you've had it. I mean, because usually it's a blood test to see if you're immune to it. But
love it. Qualifications?
I'm in the middle of a qualification. I'm currently a student nurse.
Well, that's fine.
And I've just had my TB vaccine done, literally in the last week. So.
Well, that's brilliant. A round of applause. That's a double qualification for Kelly. You're probably the most qualified person in the country to answer this question at the moment, in the middle of your studies and recently vaccinated as well. Thank you, Kelly. Questions that still need answers then. So we've got the soft, we've done the hand clenching. Why are only orange Smarties flavoured? We've done the flowers and plants question. Why? I know that one. I should have got that one, Phil, when you think about it. Why would the first clocks not have 24 numbers on them? Think about it. Anyway, we've done the sperm speed. We've done the TB scar. Are airships going to be a thing? Are airships ever going to replace aeroplanes? And what was... Have we got one more? Or is that it? And that was it. The 24-hour... sort of hiatus in pain that you get after some serious exercise. Who asked that question? What was his name? Was it Ben? It was Ben, yeah. It's coming up to 11:45. Squeeze in one more. John's in Manchester. John, question or answer?
It's a question.
Thank you.
I've been blind for about 3 years now, and I've just had the operation for cataracts. I can see again. But during that time, I've had a lot of time to... think about things.
I bet you have.
And one of my hobbies is the meaning of words and place names.
Oh, lovely.
Right.
Yeah.
And this one word has been nagging at me. My favourite animal in the world is a penguin.
Solid
and
choice.
And I was thinking to myself, why is the name penguin, why is it named after a Welsh word, which means white head?
Is that true?
Does it? Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I did not know that. Penguin.
Yeah, and I'm just
sounds quite Welsh. Now you've said it you've sounds quite Welsh, doesn't it? Penguin.
Yeah.
Penguin.
Yeah.
Oh, I see penguin.
Yeah.
The engine.
Does it mean that the first person who seen the penguin was Welsh and had the opportunity to name the bird?
Probably.
Was it a Welsh sailor who went down to the Antarctic and seen the first penguin, and somebody said to him, "What are we going to call it? We'll call it a penguin."
A penguin. A penguin.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I would take your word. I mean, what's a penguin called in French?
I think they've just named it La Penguin.
La Penguin? You come on, you're making that up, John.
I know. La Penguin.
La Penguin.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of questions about French anyway, isn't there? The French frog's legs. What do they do with the rest of the frog?
Yeah, we haven't got time for that one, John.
I know, but
why is it? And it's definitely Welsh.
Yeah, penguin.
Penguin.
Pen is head.
And Gwyn is white. So who named the penguin? Who named the penguin? Who named the penguin? Penguin. There is a lot of. I don't know whether you know this. I sense you probably do. There is quite a large Welsh community in Patagonia.
Yes, I know.
Where there are possibly penguins.
Yeah, it could be there. They play a lot of rugby. That's why they play rugby.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. Well, you're on. Who called a penguin a penguin?
Yeah.
But no.
Thank you for listening to me anyway.
Well, John, it's a pleasure to listen to you. And if I may ask you one more question, when your sight was restored after 3 years being beset by cataracts.
It's wonderful.
Oh, I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like. What did you most look forward to seeing again?
I can't think really. One of the first things that I appreciated was looking through my window and seeing the clouds go past. I didn't know I'd missed it that much. And that's what I missed and I didn't know that I missed it. But while I was watching the clouds, something ridiculous happened.
What's that?
A seagull collided with a blackbird and started fighting in midair. And it got me thinking of why all these birds, millions of birds, are flying around, and why you don't see them colliding with each other.
Crikey. You went from poetry there to surrealism.
Well, that's what I've been doing while I've been blind. I've been composing poetry as well, which I didn't think I could ever do. I mean, I do it.
Go on, give us one.
No, the rude. Yeah, very rude.
Well, then we'll leave it right there, John. You take care, mate, and I hope we speak again soon. It's 12:48.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 10 to 1. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A lot of love for John. I know you're like me because you really want to hear one of his rude poems. Now I know that he has a proclivity for rude poems. I'm very grateful that he gave us the answer to the question I asked him about what he'd most look forward to seeing after he came back after his eyesight was restored by that cataract operation, because he could have indulged some of his lewd enthusiasms at that point in proceedings, and thankfully he didn't. But can we find out, and I think this should be our top priority for John, who is almost certainly going to win a board game in about 8 minutes' time. But for the benefit of John, can we find out who called a penguin? Because we think it's Welsh, and that doesn't make any sense. What with there being no penguins in Wales, except, of course, in a zoo. Sharon is in High Wycombe. Sharon, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Good morning, James.
Hello.
Lovely to speak to you.
Likewise.
Can I just say that 8 years ago, when my daughter got married, you were actually on the video that was played for her wedding. You made a comment about the wine being passable or something like that.
Someone would have, just to be clear, I wasn't sort of gate crashing proceedings, but someone had asked me to record a special message for the bride and groom, I presume.
Yes. Well, it was. Yeah. I don't know if you'd been to another wedding and you said that, or whether it was for my daughter. Anyway, she loves you.
Oh, how lovely! Well, do send her my love, won't you? I think it sounds bespoke.
She's probably listening. Actually,
that rings a bell now that you mention it. I think I did record it. Did I not say their names?
No, you just said the wine was passable.
Oh, okay.
Or reasonable, something like that. She'd know.
Yes.
So my answer is to the sperm question. Why do the Y sperm swim faster?
Yes.
So you've got 23. You've got 23 pairs of chromosomes in your normal body cells, and in the sperm cell you have half, so you have 23, and in the egg cell you're 23, and the last pair 23, are known as the sex chromosomes.
Right.
So in the Y sperm you've just got a Y sex chromosome, and in the females you've got the X sex chromosome.
Yes.
So the Y has got a little bit missing, so it weighs ever so slightly lighter.
And therefore it moves ever so slightly faster, but faster enough to have an influence upon fertilisation.
Yes, and there are some people, didn't work for me, where you can if you time having sex just as the egg's ovulated, the Y sperm swim faster, get there.
Yep.
You've got more chance of having a boy.
You shouldn't have said that on the radio. If your daughter's listening, should you, Sharon?
She knows.
Flippin' heck.
I think I told her as well.
Okay. It's too late. It's out there now, isn't it? I like that. So it makes perfect sense then. So depending on... So why would the shorter journey suit the other one better? Why would you be more likely to have a girl?
If it's a shorter journey?
Yeah. Because surely they come out the blocks fast.
If you have the X sperm are supposed to be more, what's the word?
Robust.
Vigorous, yes.
Vigorous.
They're more robust.
Yeah, okay.
So
you're on? No, you got it.
So, yeah, okay.
What are your qualifications, Sharon?
Well, I am a retired biology teacher, but also I did a lot of research when I was trying
not to have a daughter. called Evie.
Yes.
Hang on, aren't you a bit freaked out that I knew that last bit?
Did you know her name was Evie? I've already mentioned that.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Oh, so you didn't say her name in the wedding video?
No. Hang on, you need to be more freaked out by that.
Yeah, how did you know that?
Yeah, thank you. Even more freaked out, I think. How on earth did I do that? Because everyone's listened to this. You can listen back on catch up. You've not said anybody's name.
How did you know her name was Evie?
She just texted me, so I can't believe my mum's phoned you again. and now I've got quite a little running commentary here. She says, now she's talking about sex. I've got a gross here as well, also so I've got James, that's my mum Sharon again, followed by, she's talking about sex, followed by gross. So I've had a kind of weird red button type director's cut commentary coming from the daughter that you never wanted while you've been talking to us about sperm. Here's a round of applause for Sharon and for Evie, I think, at the very least. That's lovely stuff.
Bye-bye.
No, thank you. Take care, Sharon. I think your phone's about to ring. Tom's in Tame. Tom, question or answer?
It's an answer, thanks, James.
Carry on.
So it's for DOMS. It's for the muscle soreness.
Yes, the 24-hour hiatus.
Yes. Yeah, the acronym is DOMS, DOMS.
Delayed onset muscle syndrome? Soreness, sorry, go on.
Say what you see, pretty much. So essentially, what your man would have done on his cycle ride is he would have done that big old cycle ride in one go, possibly without doing, I don't want to have a slight on him, but maybe not doing the full amount of training that he could have done.
Sounds plausible.
To prevent it, because that's one way to prevent it.
Okay.
So doing a big old intense activity without doing as much training as needed, you get micro tears in your muscles.
Right.
And then the DOMS hits you usually 24 hours, if not 72 hours later, and it's the micro tear. So it's almost like getting punched, having a bruise that then turns up further down the line, and then obviously it's sore as well.
It starts hurting later. Is it? Yeah. So it's got nothing to do with adrenaline or anything like that?
No. I mean,
it starts hurting when it starts repairing, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's how you build muscle, right? So you get micro tears from when you do weight training or similar. The tears then repair back stronger as well. So yeah.
Yep. Qualifications.
Chemistry and sport and exercise science degree.
Flipping out, that'll do. Round of applause for Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Matthew's in Waltham Abbey. Matthew, question or answer?
I have an answer for you, James.
Carry on.
It's about the penguin question.
Penguin.
Yes. It probably is.
Probably. This is Mystery Hour, mate, not some sort of flipping speculatory process.
Well, the origin of it probably is from the Welsh penguin.
It definitely is. I found an old Susie Dent tweet.
Yeah. So in the Northern Hemisphere, we have a species of birds called auks, and they fill the same ecological niches as penguins in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, there's an extinct auk called the great auk, which died out in mid-Victorian era.
Wasn't that
it looks
great?
Remarkably like a penguin. No, I don't know if it tasted very good particularly.
Yeah.
It died out in about 1852 was the last sighting of it. However, when European explorers went down to the Southern Hemisphere, they saw these birds which look remarkably like great auks, the Latin name of which is pinguinus, and they just gave them
Called
the
it a
name.
penguin?
Yep.
So where's the Welsh come from then?
So there's an island off the coast of Wales called Penguin, which does mean white head, which is a colony of auks. But it could be that, but it could also be the fact that they have white on their heads as well.
That'll do. Qualifications?
I'm a very amateur ornithologist.
Oh, so am I. Actually, I'm probably more amateur than you. Aren't there a lot of robins?
At the moment?
Well, just generally. I've got Chirp-O-Matic on my phone. I keep thinking, well, that's nice. I've found a new bird, so I record it. It's always a bloody robin.
Oh, you're in Chiswick, aren't you? So yeah, you would hear those. Yeah. So robins call loudly during the day because they territorially, and they can call over the noise of all the traffic and hum.
And they end up dominating your sound trackers. Anyway, have a round of applause on me.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give the Mystery Hour board game to John, which is something for him to do when he's not watching seagulls smash into blackbird. Was it a blackbird? No. Was it a blackbird and a seagull? A seagull would win that. Are you sure it wasn't a crow? Anyway, If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
I spent the morning crying.
I can see from your... Are you
Oh,
all
can
right?
you?
What's
I'm
that?
fine. Do I still look like I'm crying?
You do look a little
Lord.
dewy-eyed, Sheila,
God,
I would
I've just
say.
been... Though that service in Normandy, or services plural in Normandy, I've
Are
just
you
seen...
going to be all right?
I'm going to be
able
fine.
hold it
I
together?
was going to say, could James just hang around in the...
Another mystery hour.
In the office, in case I need to bring him in. 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 In case I need to bring him in.